really excited about today's session. It is International Nurses Week. Well, so what I know for sure is it's Nurses Week in the United States from May the 6th to May the 12th. And in Canada, Nurses Week starts today and runs until next week. And I'm not quite sure, and I didn't have time to look up when Nurses Week is in Australia or the UK or other jurisdictions where I know we have a lot of followers. But regardless of whether it is this week at She Recovers, we're celebrating nurses. So welcome to two of my favorite nurses, Mitzy Averett and Tiffany Swadine. And I'm going to just tell you a little bit about each of them. So Mitzy, raise your hand so we know which one is Mitzy. This is Mitzy. And Mitzy's been a nurse for 44 years, and she's celebrating and has been celebrating annual recovery milestones for many decades. Discovering and embracing multiple pathways and patchworks of recovery around year 35 in her recovery journey, Mitzy understands the value of supporting other women along any path they choose. She acknowledges that each person knows their own individual needs and motivations better than anyone else. And Mitzy is also, she'll tell us more about her career, but she's also been very involved as a nurse educator. She is just now moving into, you don't call it retirement. I think you call it something different. And you can tell us about that in a few moments. In any event, we're really delighted to have Mitzy here. And Mitzy is a She Recovers coach, and she's an active member in our She Recovers support for healthcare and allied professionals group. Tiffany Swadine, and Mitzy lives in North Carolina. So delighted to have you. Now we'll flip way over to the other coast, to Washington State, and my friend Tiffany Swadine. Tiffany is a certified life and recovery coach, a meditation teacher, and a registered nurse in recovery from addiction to opioids and alcohol. She utilizes Buddhist concepts of compassion, equanimity, generosity, and loving kindness to guide her business and recovery journey. By living sober out loud and sharing her personal journey, Tiffany aims to eradicate shame and stigma, especially within the healthcare industry, and empower all who seek recovery to live a life of radical self-love. We'll be sharing the links so that you can learn more about Mitzy and Tiffany and their coach offerings as well. Welcome to both of you. I'm just really been looking forward to this. So thank you for being here. I think where we're going to start is kind of where we are in the world, right? And, where we are is maybe there's this glimmer of light around this COVID-19 pandemic moving in the off into the distance, please. But what we do know for an absolute fact is that the pandemic has really impacted healthcare professionals and in particular nurses. And what I want to talk about today is just this kind of intersections between nursing and addiction or other mental health issues and stress and nurses needing to take care of themselves. Tiffany and Mitzy shared some really interesting statistics with me, something that I didn't quite know. And that is that it's probable that between 14 and 20% of nurses have actually identified as having a substance use disorder. Some, other statistics say between 10 and 20. But even so, if there's 3.5 million nurses just in the United States, and it's even the lowest of 10%, I can't do math fast enough. That's a lot of nurses who are struggling with behavioral health issues. And I can only imagine, we know, we've seen the research, we've seen the results of this, but how this pandemic has been affecting those nurses. And although because we are She Recovers, we do acknowledge that there are, of course, non-women nurses in the world, but we're gonna focus on who we know and what we know today. Again, thank you, Mitzy and Tiffany, for being here. I'm going to ask you each just to talk a little bit about, just for a minute, maybe, what has, as a nurse in recovery, as a nurse educator, as a recovery advocate, as a coach, what have been your observations in this past year and a bit around how nurses are doing during this pandemic? Mitzy, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you so much. And I'm delighted to be here, Dawn and Tiffany both. My beginning was in 12-step recovery, and that was the most common support system I knew, and that really fell apart during the beginning of the pandemic. Face-to-face meetings were shut down here in North Carolina, and I'm sure in a lot of other places. And so there were people that I had been supporting in recovery, And one of them really struggled. She had licensure issues with her healthcare profession, and this whole change of not being able to gather in community together in person, and us all working hard to see what kind of things would make it online to support each other. And I'm so grateful this one did, and that I found out about it. But she ended up having a relapse during this pandemic time. And it just was, for me personally, I luckily had a much longer term foundation. It's always still moment by moment for all of us, but I did have resources to reach out to, but it has been a struggle. And I wasn't working in a hospital setting, so I was in an education setting, and I'm very grateful for the resources that I discovered, especially this one.
And I know you work a lot in collegiate recovery, so you were seeing the effects of the pandemic on younger people in the educational system as well.
Yes, we saw a definite increase in overdoses in our area with younger people, and collegiate recovery really, and it's through collegiate recovery that I found out about She Recovers. This area doesn't have a lot of multiple pathway information available. And so I'm so grateful, because it was just heart-wrenching to see the number of deaths that occurred of people
Well,
that I knew.
I know. And we're just so glad that you found us, Mitzi, and we're keeping you. Over to you, Tiffany. How has the pandemic been for nurses working in hospital, from what you've been able to observe?
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. I worked in medical ICU over the last few years, but during the pandemic. And I also work as a clinical instructor. So I see nursing students who are just coming into the industry and are terrified, sort of falling apart during school, needing extraordinary amount of support that that any college student does need, but we really couldn't keep up with it. There just wasn't. There's not enough. There's still not enough. And as Mitzi shared, relapse seems to be a very common theme this year for those who are already in recovery and working on sobriety. Research shows that there has been an escalation in use of alcohol and prescription medications and drugs for coping with the stress of the pandemic. So those that maybe didn't have a use disorder prior to COVID potentially do have that now. And an escalation in job burnout. And that's, as Mitzi has mentioned, that nurses are leaving the department they worked in. I saw, and actually I felt it was a very brave move to see nurses leave the ICU early, knowing that it wasn't going to be healthy for them to stay. But that's difficult within our industry. The movement and the turnover rate that has happened this year, and then nurses choosing to leave the industry altogether, which has been, pretty heartbreaking.
Well, I know, and I've seen and heard conversations from healthcare professionals, both in our She Recovers support for healthcare and allied professionals, and in the press and elsewhere around. Nurses are caregivers. I mean, they're passionate about caregiving, and they want to be there. I've seen so many nurses talk about who may not be nursing now, feeling like obligated to go back into nursing because the need is so high. And I think about, I've read about nursing students actually being thrown into hospitals before they're even really done completely their training. Like they're having like this early entry into it because the need was so great. So I can only imagine what a conflict it is, for nurses to be having to try to take care of themselves and yet have all this pressure, both externally and internally around, but this is what I'm here to do. And this is my moment to step up. So, we, for a very long time here on Vancouver Island where I live, we would go outside at 7:00 p.m. And I know they did this elsewhere in the world, and we would just hammer pots and pans, and we had all sorts of different noisemakers. And to be honest, in the beginning, we didn't even realize that we didn't even have anybody in the hospital here where we were but we were still just so grateful for our healthcare professionals and remain so, especially in these recent surges. So just for anybody who's listening, who is a nurse or other healthcare professional who's been a part of this pandemic, we are grateful to you, and the support that you've shown all of us. We hope as a foundation, the She Recovers Foundation, is to support you in any areas of recovery that you may feel you could benefit from. So let's talk a little bit personally about finding recovery as a nurse. And at first we were talking about bullet points, and I wrote finding recovery as a nurse, and then I thought about Mitzi's story, and I kind of said, or B, having it find you. So Mitzi, do you want to talk a little bit about how you landed in recovery many years ago?
Yes, I came from a family that was just filled with medical people of all sorts of different ways. And both of my sisters went to nursing school before me. So I headed off straight out of high school in 1974. And, nursing school was my goal. And drinking was legal for 18-year-olds such as myself. And I began to experience a high tolerance for alcohol in college and had no idea. No one ever back then talked about that being a warning sign. In healthcare, we talk about so many, does anybody in your family have breast cancer or this or that? And nobody was saying, boy, if you can put the alcohol away like you do, be careful, because that might not end up working out so well for you. And so even though there were other things that were very important to me, the only thing I could hold on to during that time was the grades. I let go of other tennis and other activities and friends that didn't really focus on that socialization, because it became so important. And I didn't understand that was happening because I kept the grades up. Graduated with honors, and within 3 years, I was, as a new nurse, had gravitated so much toward other people that drank, trying to find people that drank like I did. And it progressed. And I ended up stealing narcotics from work after having been a parent's dream in high school. Never had anything, just was a good kid. And I was taken out of the hospital where I worked in handcuffs in 1980 by federal DEA agents. And this was a long time ago, and a lot of things that people didn't know. And my license was immediately revoked. There was no possibility of discussion of that. And my family hired a lawyer, and an agreement worked out that if I followed the directions, the guidelines, the mandates, that I wouldn't go to prison right now. And I was relieved. I mean, I had been struggling so much with not wanting to be that person. I would go to work every day saying, I'm not going to do it today. And I couldn't not do it. And so I very honestly just confessed to everything and said, I'll do anything. I'm so glad that, you're going to help me. And unfortunately, they sent me to a psychiatrist, and that's it. Nobody mentioned recovery, any need for a 12-step or anything. It was just see this psychiatrist, and he was not well informed. And that's one of the things as a healthcare professional today. I just want people to make sure that they're seeking appropriate help. So anyway, I didn't have my license for 2 years. And when I was able, and I worked another job, and when I was able to get it back, I really financially, it was much better to go back to being a nurse. And I did. And it really was unbelievable how it's not really. I had been drinking periodically throughout that time because nobody said that alcohol had anything impact, because I had never had any alcohol related charges or problems that were visible. And so as soon as I got back in a med room as a nurse, it was like Pavlov's dog, and I couldn't not do it. But the true blessing is that I, at that point, worked at a hospital where the director of nursing knew what appropriate meant and knew where to recommend that I get help that had a special focus for healthcare professionals, not because we're better than anybody else, because it's harder for us to be patients, really hard. And so I went through a great long-term treatment program and have been in recovery since 1982. And through community, though, is the important thing. It's about working on what needed to be worked on. And it's so much more than just not drinking and using and not committing felonies, which really helps, the whole resume thing. But and the good news is that I've had an amazing career. I mean, once I got into good recovery, and I mean, I'm a hard worker. I'm a good nurse. I'm smart, and I've had an amazing career built on the foundation of recovery. And it did take some time to get through getting, you don't rebuild Rome in a day. But once I did that, I've had an amazing career.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. What was the program that you went to? Do you mind saying?
Well, it was in Atlanta. I was born and raised in Georgia, and there was, it actually exists, I don't think, Ridgeview, and it was run by a man named Talbot a Dr. Talbot, that some people have heard of from the old days. And so it had specifically a nurses support group, and the doctors had a support group, and all held, and priests, they had a track for priests. And it was just this real clear understanding that it happens to anyone. And what's most helpful is for you to gather together in community with other people that have similar situations so that you can work through what you need to work through.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mitzi. Tiffany, tell us a little bit about whether you found recovery or recovery found you. I mean, it's the same thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it sort of is. Mitzi is such an inspiration to me. I want to say that first. I really want to be Mitzi when I grow up. I do. We have some parallels in our professional and personal journeys. So I found myself seriously addicted to opiates in about 2014 after starting to take Vicodin for migraines. And that's a really common story in the general public and in healthcare professionals, getting addicted for sleep issues or for a physical injury. And even though I was quite knowledgeable, I was already, I'd been a nurse for 8 years or so. I'd been an administrator as a nurse. Like Mitzi, I was top of the class in nursing school. Many of us who do have a use disorder or some behavioral health or mental health challenges are also quite intelligent and overachievers and loving and caregivers. And that had been my path. But I was really facing job burnout at this time in 2014. I was taking care of my father who was ill. I had a teenager at home. I was going through a divorce. And I had access to Vicodin for my migraines, and it became a daily thing. And I was drinking pretty heavily as well. That was a big part of the culture. I worked night shift, and we would go out for breakfast beer after work, and everyone would drive home, and nobody would talk about it. Nobody would talk about the bad parts of that. And there were some, but it was very taboo to talk about whether it was a problem for you or not, right? The stigma runs so deep. So I started seeking help. I knew it was affecting my relationships, and there was potential for it to affect my career. And I was turned away by at least 3 chemical dependency counselors when I told them I was a nurse. The conversation wasn't, let's get you into the program for nurses. It was, you can't say anymore. I have a duty to report. You need to find someone else. So they exacerbated my feeling that I wasn't allowed to have this problem, and I wasn't allowed to share this problem. I live in Washington State. There is an alternative to discipline program here. I was surface aware of the program, but also it was really there was a lot of silence around it and a lot of stigma around it. And I wasn't going to be that nurse. I already was that nurse, but I wasn't going to be that nurse. I was so determined to get clean and sober without ever telling anybody. So that didn't work out so hot for me. In 2016, I was caught diverting from work, similar to Mitzi. That's a fancy word for stealing drugs, because I was psychologically and physically dependent on them. And then I got an opportunity to go into the WHPS program, which has been an absolute blessing. I mean, by that point, I had been addicted for years and really was ready to get help. I really was. So I was able to take a few months off work, go to intensive outpatient program. And yeah, that's where my recovery started. About a year later is when I found She Recovers and started to tiptoe into sharing my story out loud, because I realized that I had suffered in silence for a long time. And that meant that there's hundreds of thousands of others who are doing the same, as you said. I mean, those statistics are who we know. That doesn't count who we don't know. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of my journey into where I am today in recovery.
Well, what a beautiful segue to one of our next topics, which is this concept of recovering out loud. And one of the She Recovers intentions and guiding principles reads, when we are ready, we recover out loud so that women who are struggling can find and join our movement. And I just, if you could each speak a little bit to I mean, why is it? First of all, I want to say that it's with that, we're not saying that everybody has to recover out loud now. We don't have to say that everybody has to recover out loud by telling, their story. There's recovering out loud might mean that one day you tell one person your story and it helps that person. So, sometimes people see that as one of them. They go, oh, I don't know if I ever want to tell the world what's going on with me. But it really is different. Sharing today, this is recovering out loud in a very obvious way. We may reach thousands and thousands of people. So that's quite different than maybe being on an airplane one day and somebody is talking about their behavioral health issue and you get to say, you know what, me too. And that's recovering out loud as well. So I want to make sure that people understand that, but also would like to ask each of you, we'll start with you, Tiffany, like for you, what is the importance and the promise of recovering out loud? What does it do for you individually? And what do you think that it does for other nurses? You've just kind of touched on it, which is why I'm picking up where you left off.
I love how you said that. What is the promise of it? So my first year in sobriety, I did everything possible to keep people from knowing. I was so terrified. I didn't tell my own family. I lied. I pretended I was going to work when I was going to treatment. And for me, I realized that I was still living a double life, and it didn't feel good. It felt like I was not living in alignment with myself and my values, and my recovery was growing and I liked it. It felt good. So when I decided to start sharing, like I said before, I really wanted to help just maybe one person who had felt the way I felt. I knew there had to be some in my own department, in my own hospital. And I had a family friend who had posted about her recovery on Facebook, and I had no idea that she was going through that. She actually took me to my first meeting. So I'd had an inspiration of somebody choosing to be out loud when it was right for her. And what a relief that gave me. That connection was really paramount in my recovery. And this has been a bit of a living amends for me. I really felt like I had breached the integrity of my profession and my own values. And I was living so far outside of how I wanted to live. And I kind of wondered, if I would ever get back to being that person and that nurse, that wholeness. So recovering out loud helps me get there. And I also learned that, some of the fear is, how will people treat us? What will they say? I wouldn't go to the cafeteria. I was going to work through a different door. I was terrified of seeing the people that I worked with, because conversations around substance use and diverting in particular were really pejorative. And And I recognized an opportunity that I could help change that, because they didn't see me as a bad person or an addict. They saw me as a great nurse and a great mom and a team member. And I had the substance use disorder. So what an opportunity to show that it's not just a certain demographic that this happens to, or that does this, and that it's not a moral failing. So I started experimenting around, I didn't want rumors to happen. I wanted to be in charge of them. Does that make sense? I saw an opportunity to be in charge of my own story and to just show up exactly as I am, so that if somebody did talk behind my back and say, oh my God, did you hear Tiffany, da, 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 the other person could say, yeah, she wrote about it online yesterday. I did hear from her. So rumors can't really exist if I am in charge of that story. And it worked. And also overarching really is, I was met with compassion by so many. And then I started to get the emails and the texts and the phone calls of, oh my gosh, me too. I need help. How do I navigate this? Where do I go? Thank you for sharing your story. So that was 4 years ago now, I think.
I remember one of the first times you wrote, I think was it the 2-part piece that you wrote for nurses, or was that a little bit later? I know you were blogging, but you actually wrote for another publication. And I just remember sharing it widely and was just so proud of you and knowing what a great difference it made. And I love what you talk about it. You were controlling the narrative, right? And,
Yeah.
I think that is really important for us in our recovery. It's the shame and the stigma that is associated with being in recovery from mental health disorders, and including substance use disorder, is a lot about what's going on out there, but it's also about what's going on in here, right? And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't until I could and it took a long time, and it took a lot of practice, but for me to be able to come out and say, yes, these are the behaviors I did, and this is what I did, and this is who I was for a period of time, or not really who I was, but these are the things that I did. And until I started, the work is internal, right? We release the shame and the guilt and all of those things that go with it. And then we're more able to present as somebody who is not presenting as a stigmatized person, but presenting as empowered because and despite the things that we've done and the places that we've been. Mitzy, I know you're an avid recovery advocate as well. And you've, you talk about being in such long-term recovery, and recovering out loud is something just a little bit newer to you. Tell us about it.
Well, it's interesting. Tiffany and Dawn are holding my hand really about some of the different ways to recover out loud, because I'm just a little bit older than Tiffany, just a little. I turned 65 this year. So the whole blogging and some of those other ways, but it was just an interesting process. In the 12-step community, this is discussed, a fair amount, and the distinction between advocacy versus anonymity. And I respect that. I owe my life to 12-step initially and what it did for me. But because of what Tiffany said, there are, and because of what I've seen so much of in collegiate recovery, people are dying. And if I can help one person understand that it is possible, the most common way that having a substance misuse makes the news is when people crash and burn, and when they have to go back, to treatment as a celebrity or that type of thing. And so it was interesting. I did when I got into treatment in Georgia and I got more stable, I started volunteering for the Nurse Advocate Program with the Georgia Nurses Association. And so that was my first foray into helping other nurses and advocating. And it was a vital, important part of my recovery process to interact with other nurses who were struggling. And I began with my involvement in that and there was one nurse educator in the area where I lived at that time who was such a pro recovery advocate. She had me come speak to her nursing class every year. And so that was kind of how I began to step out a little bit. But it's interesting when and I did actually work for a treatment center for a while. And so that provided some different opportunities to do that. But then when I moved to North Carolina, I really felt the need, talk about self-care. I felt the need to not work in the field anymore, not work in a treatment center anymore, and really take care of my own recovery process. And I ended up kind of going underground for a while, other than just my recovery meetings, just going to 12-step meetings. And that was all I knew. I didn't know that other things existed, and it was so shocking. I got recruited. This is where my, being in recovery and being a good solid worker and nurse, when I finished my master's in education, related to education and leadership, I got recruited to go to a university. I had been at a community college for 15 years. I got recruited, and they had collegiate recovery, and I'm like, what is this animal? What is this community? How could I have been in recovery and active within my own recovery circles and been an educator for 15 years and not known about this? And then I just got opened up to this world of like William White and multiple pathways. And William White is a researcher who does a lot of research about pathways and recovery, and he really studies recovery. And so, there's just a lot of ways to support people on this process, and it doesn't have to be, it's got to be this way or the highway. You've got to do this or you're not going to, be successful. So I am just so grateful until that I found collegiate recovery, and that really opened up a new avenue of advocacy. And as I said, it then got me here to She Recovers, and our support group really is what I consider to be my home group now, because there are so many of us that are so supportive of each other wherever we are in the process. And I have to say one thing, even though I haven't had a substance, my workaholism there was no support for me recovering from my workaholism as a healthcare provider for me personally, until I got to She Recovers. Okay. So, and that speaks to what we're talking about with systems. They need us there. They need us to help take care of all these people, and they can really try to use that in a way that's like, oh, we need you because you're so great, and your patients need you, and you need to work a double or an extra or this, don't take that day off. And it's depending on your specific situation or circumstances, it is sometimes very hard, I believe, for us caretakers to take care of number one first, and to be able to be the best care provider that we can be. So I have really learned a lot, and I've always been an lifelong learner about nursing education and best practice and all sorts of things, but I hit a new level of lifelong learning about recovery when I got into some different pathway understandings about things.
That's wonderful. And I have observed in our own group, our She Recovers Support for Healthcare and Allied Professionals, that workaholism and overachievement, and it's really quite rife in this population. So, and workaholism is why She Recovers exists in the first place, because it was what my final frontier, maybe not my final frontier, but one of my last frontiers in my recovery was workaholism. You're both so great at doing segues. I want to talk a little bit about self-care for nurses in recovery. And Tiffany, I've always really admired your attention to meditation, but a couple of things. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about your recovery patchwork and kind of what you employ and what works for you as part of your recovery. And then touch on self-care and what that means to you within the context of your recovery.
Thanks. So I have done a bit of 12-step. I've done a bit of SMART recovery. I've done some CBT, some psychotherapy, a variety of things. But what I found really helped me change my day-to-day relationship to myself, to my thoughts, and to everything around me, external stimuli, is a path of mindfulness. And that for me means meditation practice. And it's a practice. It's not a perfection. I found a Buddhist inspired path to recovery that makes a lot of sense to me. So I go to recovery Dharma meetings in addition to the She Recovers home group that Mitzy was talking about with our other healthcare professionals. And over the last few years, this practice and study and attempt to be more mindful has helped me understand that I don't have to believe all of my thoughts. I don't have to follow all of my thoughts. I don't have to do what they say. And also has helped me train myself to be compassionate towards me and loving towards me and generous towards me. I definitely have the caregiver-ism. Can that be an ism? Can that be a thing? Yeah. Caring for everyone else and everything all the time and letting myself be very last. So I've had to do this really radical transformation to take care of myself. And self-care can be we talk about kind of like the fluffier things, like take a bath and go for a walk and smell some essential oils. And those are part of it. Those are important. But for me, the deeper self-care is being true to what I need on a daily basis, what fills me up and what takes away. And you can look at, in your relationships, what does that look like? In career, what does that look like? There's, the whole wheel of life, different areas. And it can be extremely challenging because sometimes what we're really good at is not really good for us. And that's been an experience for me. It's taken me twice now working in the ICU to learn that working in the ICU is not the right place for me. And that's been my self-care this year, is to step away from something that was wonderful for a time, that I was really freaking good at, and is really unhealthy for me, doesn't let me do good self-care. Boundaries, that's what comes to mind as well. Boundaries are a huge part of self-care. And nurses, I think there's some great, I don't have the numbers, but there's great statistics about codependency and being children of alcoholics, that nurses tend to fit that mold. And we maybe don't always have the best boundaries. I'm glad you brought up, being able to say no to an extra shift. That is a powerful form of self-care. And without even an excuse, right? Without an excuse, just no, that doesn't work for me. One of my students actually gave me an excellent response. I did some resilience training with 6-quarter nursing students last week, and I was helping them to script some of these things, because in the moment it can be hard. We feel guilty and obligated and mandated to pick up more shifts. And he said, if a manager were saying this or a charge nurse were saying it to you, why can't you work? Why won't you work? He said, I'm going to go home and take really good care of myself so that on my next scheduled shift, I'll be a great nurse for my patients. That's my plan. And brilliant, right? Brilliant. Been a caregiver for 20 years. I never had that sentence inside of me. So I'm still learning self-care too, still working on it.
Wonderful. And I know one of the things that you've done for self-care in recent years has come on some of our She Recovers retreats.
Oh my gosh, of course. It's
we
actually
really loved.
Watching women take care of themselves is how I've learned to do it, because I didn't have those role models in my life. I really had never seen it until I went to a retreat. I think I've been to maybe 4 now, something, and one to come in October.
Yes.
So yes, thank you for role modeling such great self-care.
You bet. Okay, and I know, Mitzy, you also have some unique and kind of individualized ideas about self-care and recovery. Can you share them with us?
Well, as Tiffany said, sometimes it's easy to look at those real visible things, but the harder stuff is if it is hard for me to find my own voice, whether it's work related or in my marriage or with my now grown son, just being able to believe that it is okay to set a boundary and ask for help. Asking for help is not an easy process for us who are so used to helping everyone else. And so trying to stay clear about that for not only myself, but to also um, show that as a way, as an experienced nurse. And long-term recovery, it just means I haven't had a substance, but there's still areas that are more struggle than others in terms of being able to say, I can't do that right now. I don't think, or I'm not, I saw someone say, I'm too busy. Let's go back to my workaholism. I'm too busy is the adult version of the dog ate my homework. And it's not being able to just claim and say, that's not my priority right now. I cannot do that right now because I have a lot of great things going on in my life. And I do enjoy my work. A lot of aspects of, especially as an educator, I really do enjoy it so much, but I also need to carve out time for me and to take care of me and commit to me in that process. So for me, it was interesting. The pandemic also, because dentists shut down and, things like, I mean, just all sorts of things happened to then throw other wrenches in the process of, yes, keep going to the dentist. And I had really, I had not done, I got a massage for my 50th birthday. And I hadn't had one since then until I came to She Recovers. And that's pretty bad to confess to that. Okay. To really just take time to make an appointment and do that. And so things like, having an appointment for whatever and in whatever way or whatever area, or and if a therapist, or and we talk a lot in that healthcare professionals group about, we're good at listening to other people, but we're not always the best at acknowledging, listening to ourselves and honoring ourselves in that process.
Great. I love that idea. One of my things on my self-care list to do this week is make an appointment for a mammogram. They had,
Yes.
they shut down. It was probably a year before the pandemic when I got my reminder to book it.
Right.
And I haven't yet, so I'm going to do that. But also in our group, in our She Recovers Support for Healthcare and Allied Professionals, we have a lot of therapists. So there is no health without mental health. So we're filled with therapists and social workers and others. And I really think that that's part of the magic of the healthcare group, is that it's medical and mental health professionals. It's really quite incredible. Anyway, we love our group, obviously.
And I am going to a retreat in October as well. That was one of the first things on my, it's like this year my boss, who is actually, I think, watching today, I said, I am not available this time in October, no matter what.
Yeah, these are our first two retreats. We've hosted 40 retreats over the past 10 years. These are the first retreats specifically for healthcare and allied professionals. There are 2 4-day retreats in Maine, York Harbor, Maine, and there's information about those on our website. I think we do have just a couple of spots left in one or the other, maybe one in one and a few in the other. Tiffany, or you're both She Recovers coaches, which means that you've done training to become a recovery specific coach specifically around recovery. Tell us a little bit about how you plan on using that, or whether that's going to be a focus of some of your work going forward, Mitzy, or and where you're at with that too, Tiffany, because we do believe in individualized pathways and patchworks of recovery. And I happen to believe that one of the best ways to figure out what your recovery pathway and patchwork might look like is to be guided by somebody who has access to all the options out there that we just don't know about. We don't think about. So, Mitzi, do you want to go first?
Well, I was so excited, and I did the the training to be a She Recovers coach over this last Christmas holiday winter break time from my full-time job, and the plan is to keep that on hold until I got to this point of being looking. It's preferment. That's the term. I am turning 65, and I am retiring from full-time academia. But there are some preferment things that are kind of coming at me from different directions, but I am just going to do what I prefer to do, and the top of that list is take better care of myself first, and then be able to be better at whatever all those other things are. So I really have not developed and focused on coaching just yet, but that's in the plan.
Well, and I think we have an increasing number of She Recovers coaches in the North Carolina area. So I can just envision that somewhere down the road in 2022 or 2023, we'll have, one of our kind of regional chapter events where we'd certainly love to involve all of our coaches in that new chapter area. So
yes, there's a lot of us in North Carolina.
It's something about Tree Work. I'm always saying that there's something going on in North Carolina because a lot of women, not just in our healthcare professionals group, but in all of our groups, are from North Carolina. And it's a place that I've always wanted to visit. So I'm excited to get there. Tiffany, what's up with you these days? How are you kind of working in the recovery field, so to speak?
Yeah, so I am actively coaching. I just have a few clients at a time. I try to not let that list get too big to make sure that I'm not overstepping my own self-care boundaries as well, because I am working full-time as an educator too right now. The goal eventually, so I tend to work with women. I have had some male clients, but I tend to work with women. Half of the time healthcare professionals, the other half are not. And usually if a client wants to work with me, it's because they're interested in a mindfulness and meditation practice for themselves, because that's where my expertise lies. And eventually the idea, I'm in school right now getting a master's, and I would really like to create some of this curriculum for prevention and risk assessment for nursing schools to just be much more transparent and authentic and vulnerable from the very beginning, to help nurses on their path through this industry to take better care of themselves, and then to host workshops and retreats myself. So and I'd like to create programs to go into organizations. So they're like anti-bullying programs where the hospital can buy that that online program to help their employees. I want to teach organizations how to take care of their employees because they don't know. They're not quite sure how to do that for us, not yet. So that's the grand vision.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. And, we share some of the same goals with us as a foundation. So we're certainly going to do all we can to support both of you to do the great work that you have in mind for the future. And also just to keep reminding you to take care of yourselves first. Again, I'm going to thank you both for your time. And do either of you have any closing comments before we wrap up?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I thank everyone who came and listened, and I hope you'll reach out if you have some other questions.
And Mitzy, congratulations on the very exciting preferment stage of your life, although, don't let that huge grant opportunity eat up your preferment.
I know.
Just a reminder, a little self-care reminder there.
Yes.
Tiffany.
Yeah, I'll just also say thank you. And, yeah, we're here for you. I just don't want anybody to suffer alone and in silence. That's my mission. So please reach out when it's right for you and you feel ready. And this is exciting, right? This is just going to spread. And a few years from now, things are going to be different. And that's really exciting. And thank you, Dawn, for being such a huge part of that, such a catalyst. So,
yes. Wow. Thank you both for being such beautiful examples of recovery and of advocacy and support for other women. So thank you.